That's why I titled the book Greatness Beyond the Badge, specifically because we never know when we're not going to be working for this organization. And when you're not working for an organization, what's next?
Welcome to Failure to Stop, the #1 channel where police meet society and culture. I am Drew Breezy, and today is a very special episode. We're going to be talking with Michael Laidler, who works for the Federal Bureau of Prisons currently, but has a storied career within law enforcement. Definitely someone a great resource for leadership development, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. Michael, welcome.
Well, thank you, Drew, for giving me the opportunity to speak on your podcast today. And like he said, I do have an extensive amount of law enforcement. I'm in my 18th year at this time, and I've been fortunate to have experience in police work, border patrol, and corrections. And throughout that time, what I've learned is there's a lot of growth for us. And the more we can speak about it, the more we can add value to each other when it comes to this growth, the more we see our brotherhood, our sisterhood rise, because we know, unfortunately, that this field isn't the most exciting field to get into right now. Not because the work isn't exciting, but there's just a lot of negative parts that people associate with it. But one of my goals is to show that we still have a lot of good times, we are positive, and that we can be a benefit to each other.
You know, part of the mass exodus of the profession over the last couple of years is probably from social pressures. It's from administrative pressures or whatever. So the people that are still in it, the people on the inside know that we're still sticking up for them in a way. And also there's still someone there that's going to help them develop. So I do appreciate what you're doing. Can we talk a little bit about your roots?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was raised in Miami, Florida, to my mother and my grandmother. No father involved, so it was just raised by those two, and it was amazing. They showed more than enough love that any kid could need. And during that time, it was actually pretty funny, and I talk about it in my book a little bit. What drew me into law enforcement was the O.J. Simpson trial, and that chase and how the evidence was presented, and just the testimony going back and forth really in the early 90s got me excited to be in law enforcement. Specifically, I wanted to be a detective for the LA County Police Department. So it was something that I really wanted to do just because of what I saw. And throughout that time, I continued to build my growth in law enforcement. I actually took some courses in high school, criminal justice classes, that kept pushing me higher and higher into this field. And then when I actually graduated high school, went to college, I went to Florida State University, where I started my bachelor's degree in criminal justice. I got lucky, blessed, fortunate, where I was actually hired as a police officer at 19 for Tallahassee Police Department. Spent some amazing times there. Field training officer, special response team. It was amazing. And then I decided that I wanted to go feds, so I actually jumped into border patrol, K9 handler. It was an amazing time. But then I realized that I wanted to be closer to family, and then that's when I shifted to the Bureau of Prisons. I was an officer, lieutenant, an investigator. I ran internal affairs. I ran the training department. And throughout that time in the Bureau of Prisons, I realized that I had another calling, and that was to establish a speaking business which focused on leadership development and self-awareness. And that's kind of where we sit now, and that's what brings me to shows like this. But the law enforcement has been with me since I was 6 or 7 years old, and it was great growing up in Miami, places like that, just to see how it's evolves me to the point where I'm at now.
You're somebody after my own heart because of the fact that, it's a childhood thing. I was a safety patrol captain. You know what I mean? I was a cop every Halloween. This was in my blood. The profession, I think, took a little bit of a sour turn towards the end of my career, which is fine. I mean, seasons change and people change. And, I think parting ways was probably the best thing for me and for the profession, because I can advocate on the outside. You're advocating on the inside and on the outside as well with your speaking business. And your book is Greatness Beyond the Badge, the 3 Key Principles for Self-Awareness. Where can people get a hold of your book, first of all?
Pretty simple, guys. I put it on Amazon. You type in the title, Greatness Beyond the Badge, the 3 Key Principles for Self-Awareness, and boom, you can find it in soft, paperback, hard copy, and ebook.
I could tell you it is that easy. It comes in the Kindle version as well. So how well does being a local law enforcement officer prepare you for being a federal law enforcement officer?
Well, when you're at the federal level, you look at things at more of a bigger scale. And I believe that being in local law enforcement, whether it's a PD, a sheriff's office, a a school police department, whatever that might be, you kind of see what goes on the ground each and every day. Those calls for service like traffic crashes, domestic violence, robbery, those are everyday things that happen. And I believe with the feds, it's a lot of them are so focused on very certain things that you may not see the everyday trials and tribulations that normal folk go through, so to speak. And I believe that actually being local law enforcement prepares you so when you get to the feds and you are, let's say, you're DEA and you're focused on drugs, well, there's more to the story than just drugs in most people's lives. And if you've been a police officer or if you've worked on the road at any point, that actually prepares you because you can tell what other things people have gone through.
You can definitely tell. I think you would agree with me. Some of your federal cronies who were not street cops versus the ones that are, probably for that very reason. You get little micro experiences as opposed to just having to jump into the macro all the time.
Yeah, and you learn more of the broad picture of things. You understand that once again, going back to DEA, let's say ATF with their focus on firearms, FBI, which focuses on the big cases of international things, the domestic stuff that happens every day in our lives. That's what you learn with the local side. So I, from just my experience, and I haven't done any studies or research on it, I do believe that you can have a much higher success rate if you start at a local agency and you kind of learn how some of those things go and then you go to the feds because you're just going to bring a different dynamic to those agencies because you know and you can speak the language of the people that you're going to be dealing with versus let's say you get your degree, like let's say for example DEA, they require a degree 9 times out of 10. Let's say you get 4 years of criminal justice, now you're a DEA agent, but you went from college to an academy and now you're just dealing with people on the drug level. You miss out on at least a year or two of dealing with them overall and understanding how they speak to each other and how to go to them when they don't want to see you. So I think that opportunity to work in the streets as a patrol officer at any of the local law enforcement agencies is very beneficial, especially before you go to a federal agency.
So you spent time at Tallahassee PD. You mentioned, I think it was 2005 to 2009. And in 2008, yes. I know there was just being a law enforcement officer here in Florida, I know that there was a significant case there. Rachel Hoffman, who was an informant for the Tallahassee PD, was unfortunately brutally murdered by some drug dealers, and legislation changed the way we handle informants. Can you talk a little bit about the tone and temperament in the agency and what leadership lessons you may have learned from going through an entire agency crisis like that?
I'm going to speak on both sides of it. From the patrol officer standpoint, it was rough because one of the officers was pretty much fired out the gate without any
due process, or
without any great wording. Without any due process, he was just removed. Now he did get his job back eventually. However, that year to 2 years or so, and I don't remember the exact time frame, that was tough. I mean, you're kicked out of something that you loved. Mm-hmm. And when you look at the facts, especially if you know the facts and you know you didn't do wrong in that level, you're like, I'm being punished too early. Like, at least let me get a trial, so to speak, to kind of plead my case. But like in a case like with that particular officer or investigator at that time, it wasn't very good to see. The morale was kind of low, at least when it surrounded that incident, because we're like, man, if you do everything right, and in Rachel's case, she took things into her own hands and things got out of hand. Well, how do you prevent that? Like, how do you prevent things like that? Right. But on a chief side, a deputy chief side, I kind of understand that side too, because the public's looking for answers. They're at least looking for somebody's head to go on a chopping block. We've all heard it. Well, we don't want to be naive and say that the chief doesn't answer to somebody, because he or she always does. And because they answer to somebody, they're going to have to make a decision somewhere. So unfortunately, that investigator was the person that was forced into resigning or being fired. I guess it was the best term to use for whatever happened to him. But he did get his job back. But I understand both sides. But I don't think there was a right answer in that situation, because let's say you left them on from the leadership standpoint, what kind of damage would that have done to the agency when it came to your stakeholders? And you know what I mean, Drew? So it was tough. I mean, but from the patrol side, we're like, hey, let the man keep his job and just put him in the rubber gun squad or something like that. Let's just keep him to the side. But it was one of those back and forth. So as far as leadership goes, it's one of those that you're gonna have to make tough decisions. And I learned in that situation, since there was no easy decision, you just had to make one and go with it. And as a leader, that's what we do. We look at everything we have, and then we try to take a macro look of it and say, okay, what's going to be the best for the agency? What's going to be the best going forward? And then can we recover from it? And I know at that time in 2008, there was no clear answer. It was, let's make a decision and go from there. But decisiveness and making a decision is what I really learned from that situation.
That's good. It's a unique experience, and it's unfortunate that it happened, but it really did change the way we did business. And you're right. You're going to risk capital on one side or the other. You being a leader does not mean making everybody happy. It means that you have to effectively run the organization, and you're either going to sacrifice the happiness of the people that you serve, or you're going to sacrifice the people that actually execute, that make you the leader that you are. So, I mean, it's a tough and difficult process. So you talk about your three principles, your three key principles, which is of finding yourself, sort of the discovery, the purpose, and the path to greatness. So what phase would we be in there if we were say the officer that made that fatal mistake?
It's funny. That's a great question, Drew. That's why I titled the book Greatness Beyond the Badge, specifically because we never know when we're not going to be working for this organization. And when you're not working for an organization, what's next? Who are you outside of that? Because so many of us, and I don't know if you in the same boat or not, Drew, but I identified myself as the organization forever, for the longest, because that's what you're in the academy. You go for 6 months and it's like, you're a police officer and you're going to be working for this agency for 25 years. That's, for most of us, that's at least half of our lives, at least. I believe for him, what he had to go back to was that, who are you? Discover what makes you who you are. Look at your failures. Look at your goals. Look at your wake-up calls. I mean, this situation was a major wake-up call for him as far as seeing his value to the agency and also what he could bring to his family, because it's tough to say, hey, honey, I'm fired. And she asks why. And it's like, well, I was doing my job and this person did this and this happened. And I thought I did everything right per policy at the time, but things happened. So for him, he had to go back to who he was. And that's what I tell people. You never know where you're going to be at in law enforcement, because if you deal with people, especially, we always say every call is different. Your next call can be your last call as in that uniform. And you could be looking at another job just because of someone else's decision or the way someone interpreted it. And now you're fighting for your job. And he was blessed to get his job back after a period of time, but not everybody gets it back, or not everybody wants it back, because I know other people that go through the same situation. They're like, I don't want to work for this agency no more.
You're right.
And but you have to know what that means to you. And as far as my book goes, if it was written back in 2008, I would say, hey, just take the first part of take the first principle, define who you are as a person, because you still have to be great no matter what, whether you're wearing that badge or not. Because at the end of the day, the badge is going to be taken off at some point. You're going to have to retire. You're going to have to leave it because they're going to leave you behind just based on the rules, one way or the other. So you have to be able to know who you are inside before you're able to push anything to the outside.
Yeah, I had a wake up call of my own. You know, when I was working, I had a near devastating, near career ending incident where, you know, I almost ended up going into jail. It was over alcohol. I've been alcohol free for a long time, but I love what you had to say, because to that point, I think I was probably 12 or 13 years into the career at that point, but all I knew was that job. And I think I was conditioned to believe that job was the only thing that existed.
We all are.
You hit the nail on the head in the sense that we're very expendable, in the sense that you don't know if it's an injury that's going to end your career, a bad, you could say the wrong thing to the wrong person and end your career. And for God's sakes, changing a flat tire might end your career. I think you came to that shocking realization when the jack came tumbling down on your hand one day. So you say in here, like, you're an underachiever, meaning don't just stand and wait for someone to tell you what to do. You need to start inflating, or you need to start growing within the profession. Don't just show up 8 to 5. Can you tell me a little bit more about the underachiever part?
Yeah, one of the things that I realized, and I didn't. Let me clarify. I was told I was an underachiever when I was in 11th grade by Mr. Williams, who was my criminal justice teacher, and I really didn't know what he meant at the time. I mean, I was 16 years old. What guy in his 30s can tell me what to do? He doesn't know what he's talking about. I mean, who would ever think that? Now I'm in my 30s and I'm trying to be that guy, but I didn't really know what he meant at the time. And then as life went on, I realized how I wasn't stretching myself as far as growth went. And the way I think about things now in my late 30s, I wish I would have known this in my early 20s, because I know I would have been at a different level, and a good level, as far as career profession goes. What we're conditioned to do, and I think, Drew, you kind of brought it up, is go to work from 8 to 5, do your job, go home, come back. 8 to 5, do your job, go home, and come back. We're not necessarily focused on personal growth, especially in law enforcement. And I could tell you, work for 3 different agencies. I had some, but not nearly enough worth of 18 years that has taught me to be an individual as much as be a follower of an organization. Now, I don't want anybody to quit their jobs. I don't want anybody to go to their boss and say, hey, I hate this place. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is work on yourself and then realize why you are in that role. Understand why you got this calling. Understand why you lace your boots up, you polish them. Why do you put shiner on your brass? Like why do you do all of that? And I think once you understand that, when you do have these obstacles that will come up, because trust me, I didn't think a car was going to fall on my hand when I was changing the tires as a Border Patrol agent. I had no intent on, and my shooting hand on top of that. I had no clue, but I had an option. I was working on my master's degree at the time, so I had another option. But things like that are true wake-up calls. And it shouldn't take for that to happen for you to start focusing on yourself and building yourself up. Don't wait until you get suspended based on the public's perception. Don't wait until you have a major injury to say, okay, now I want to focus on myself. Because at that point, now you're stressed out. Now you're trying to pick up a new craft, and now you're behind the ball on you. So that's kind of where my mission has been at. Like, okay, focus on your during that 8 to 5 time. Find a break in there where you're listening to podcasts like this, reading books from different authors, finding different motivation to build yourself up. Because at the end of the day, you have to be a whole person and the best version of yourself if you're going to be able to succeed in the long run and even go past whatever expectations you think you may have of yourself.
So you became a father in that period of time. You were finishing up your master's degree. You finished your master's degree and all that. And I know that like I've experienced the same thing. I finished my master's degree, and that certainly gave me a lot. I mean, it definitely gave me first of all, it gave me a whole different experience or vision about why things are done and when they're done. So I wasn't just the disgruntled employee showing up 8 to 5 anymore, like kind of like you described. It stimulated a lot of growth. But is that where you find your purpose? Is that kind of where you're driving people towards to really kind of get introspective and figure out what their purpose is?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, being a father really showed me a different side of myself. I can tell you, I had a great career in Border Patrol. I was making 6 figures after 4 years. I had a take-home ride. I had a dog named Rigo. He's an amazing, amazing Belgian Malinois. But as a father, it showed me that I had to focus on something else and look at a bigger picture of legacy. And when I started to look at what I had to do that, I had to sacrifice a few things. Now, each of us are facing something different. Some of us will choose never to be parents, or may not get the opportunity. But there's something that you want to build. You don't want to just be on this planet for 70 to 75 years and not leave some kind of legacy. And I think when I actually started to look at it at that angle with him, I said, okay, there's even more at stake now. In 2012, when my wife at the time said, hey, I'm pregnant, the stakes, they were high already because I was pushing myself. But it was even higher with the purpose that was coming underneath, because I knew that I had to leave something for him. And I knew that it was time for me to be more impactful than I was ever before. I mean, even now, he looks at my website, he reads my bio, he checks out my YouTube page. He's only 9. So he's seeing the things I'm doing. He's going to probably watch this podcast. But I want to show him that I can still be great beyond anything, any kind of like organization that's in front of me, because it's important to do, because it's at the end of the day, this is what we want. We want to see each other grow. And that's kind of where I've kind of built that purpose, just looking at him. And obviously I have other drivers, like being successful, making sure I live up to my mother's, what I want her to expect out of me, my sister. I mean, I have all that. But when I look back at everything right now, I know that's my driving force. At least the main one is creating something for him to be proud of.
That's amazing. That's the legacy that they left for you, which you're, or I mean, that they created for you. Maybe they're not, they haven't left this, but I mean, that they created for you, that you're carrying on for him. I just became a stepfather to a 9-year-old myself. And, it's pretty tough teaching a leadership lesson to a 9-year-old. I get where you're coming from. What would generate that path to greatness? Like, what are some of the tips or some of the things that you would provide someone to get on that path to greatness?
I think, and it's actually in the last chapter of my book, it's time management. It's actually something I designed called the 24-hour formula. Once again, if you say you're working 8 to 5, for example, at what part of your day are you going to grow yourself? What part of the day are you going to actually spend time building yourself up? And in my book, I talk about requiring you to give yourself 10% of your day to build yourself, which equals about 2.5 hours a day. And that does sound like a lot, but think about it. We already said you're going to work 8 to 5. So you're going to give 8 to 9 hours of your life every day to an organization, but you can't give yourself 2.5 hours. Well, like, where does that come in at? And then you got to include family time. You got to include exercise of some sort. You got to include eating. But time management, I think, has been one of the biggest factors for me when it becomes the best version of myself, because without it, it's harder to stay control of what you have going on. And when we're just going by the day and just watching different TV series, which there's nothing wrong with watching a lot of TV series, but if you don't have a purpose behind them, it can be counterproductive to your growth. But not planning out your day on a daily basis, a weekly basis, a monthly, and figuring out what part of those days are you going to grow. And if you're not giving yourself 2.5 hours, I mean, heck, I'll be happy if you give yourself 5 minutes, especially if you're not doing anything right now. But I think that's how you become the best version of yourself, is by doing, like, spending time on your own time management, writing out your schedule, writing out your day, and realizing how important it is to grow yourself in that manner.
You also hit in the book something that I've always subscribed to, which are SMART goals. Like, I know that you talked about the Coggins kind of sticky note method of reminding yourself what your goals are, but how much of an impact have the SMART goals been on your success and your growth? And what can you tell people specifically about setting goals?
So for SMART goals for myself, goals that I thought would take me 5 to 10 years, take me 3 years or less now. And it's because I put specific, measurable, actionable, relevant, and time-paced objectives in place. For example, and I'll be completely transparent with people. When January of 2022 started, I had no expectation I was going to write a book. Zero. I heard a podcast in March about a company said they can publish your book in 90 days or less. And I'm all about a challenge. So I got with that company, and they helped me set goals that met all of those SMART goals. And I had my book, the one that we're talking about right now, it was published by July 26th, after hearing this podcast in March with no expectation of writing a book. SMART goals allow you to hit any goal you have a lot easier and a lot quicker, because you're going to put different things in place to build up towards that, versus just saying, oh, I want to be a sergeant in a couple of years. Okay, what does it take to be a sergeant? What is the actual time frame? What is the time frame for your organization? If you work in a gigantic LAPD, they might be probably like 2,000 sergeants. So you may have a quicker shot at that. Or let's say you work at somewhere like Tallahassee Police. And I have friends right now that they're just becoming eligible in their 10th to 15th year. So you have to understand, SMART goals help you get to where you're trying to get quicker, but they also help you clarify what you can do. Because if you say I'm gonna be a sergeant in Tallahassee Police in 3 years, then you're just gonna be disappointed. I
Yeah,
mean,
right,
it is
right.
what it is. But if you're not setting some goals, if you're not building up, the SMART goals help you become more clear and more effective on the goals you're aiming for.
That gets back to the time bound. Like everything ties back to one of the letters in the acronym. I mean, if you wanted to be the chief of police somewhere and that's your goal, you could easily do that. But there's a lot of benchmarks you're going to have to meet along the way,
Right.
and that's where the time bound comes in. So even if you're saying to yourself, "I want to be a sergeant at LAPD or whatever," why? Why do you want to do that? At least be reflective enough to understand why you're doing that. Like, I want to be a
Mhm.
sergeant because I want to get experience in managing and leading people, and I want to
Mhm.
get experience in investigations. And this is the point where I want to start
Right.
learning about budgets. Or I think we lack focus sometimes on the goals within the goals.
Developmental strategies that are built in within them. So yeah, if you don't have those, there's the SMART is just going to be some letters on the wall. So you have to build within them to achieve them.
I used to preach actually when I taught in the academy all the time. Look, you're going to amass a million business cards. Keep them
Mhm.
because you never know when you're going to need them. But how many times do you think people have called on you based on your business card? They're going to remember you for you. They're going to remember you
Mhm.
for the book, obviously
Right.
there, but they're also going to remember you for the conversation. So, isn't that part of like the importance of introducing yourself without your title, or kind of letting people know who you are and then kind of adding the title at the end of the introduction?
Yo, that's 100% important. And I found myself back in the day always saying, I'm Officer Michael Laidler. I'm Lieutenant Michael Laidler. Whatever phrase, I'm Border Patrol Agent Michael Laidler. And then I started to realize that it was a mindset thing. I was associating the primary part of my identity with an organization. So one of the things I especially talk about in the book is flip that. Say, I'm Michael Laidler, Lieutenant. I'm Michael Laidler, Border Patrol Agent. I'm Michael Laidler, Officer. And you're going to realize you're going to start placing the importance on yourself, which that's what it has to be when you're trying to grow. And just those simple words, it goes a far way in connecting you with other people, because people don't want to know you as your title. They want to know you as you. I can tell you, people when I meet, I don't, I'm like, okay, you're an officer. Okay. But who are you? Like, what do you like to do? I know you don't like to sit and write tickets all day. I mean, so I know you don't like to go to domestic violence calls all day. I mean, I know that's not what's driving you. So who are you as a person? And I think that starts with us just simply learning how to introduce ourselves to other people when we have certain jobs, especially in law enforcement, because we're usually taught, hey, tell a person you're an officer first. Well, the longer I've done that, the longer I have learned to remove my name from that. And it was actually taught to us that way in the academy. Hey, make sure you tell them you're an officer. I mean, if I'm in uniform, okay, I'm going to tell you an officer, but I'm going to tell you I'm a person first. And then you can grow from that a little bit better. So that's usually the one of the techniques, one of the methods I really instill in my presentations, or just when I speak to people. I'm like, okay, I don't want to hear you give me your title anymore. I want you to give me your name and then tell me your title, because I want to know that person. I want to know Drew. I don't want to know police officer Drew. I want to know Drew, the police officer.
This is how much it resonates. The personal experience I had when I had to introduce myself
Mhm.
in a meeting, I was very, very uncomfortable introducing myself by rank and then name. Like, I don't listen. Here's what it comes down to. I had a friend that was in the media. She said that listen, the secret around the newsroom that you need to know is we don't know what a corporal or a detective or a colonel or a deputy chief, we don't know any of that shit. We don't
They
care.
don't. Yeah.
Nobody cares. We care about the detectives. The detectives were always cool, we always thought. But beyond that, like if you came up and said, "Hey, I'm Major so and so," what's that mean? Are you in charge of the are you in charge of the jail's dishes, or we are like, what do you do?
Yeah.
That completely resonates with me. I'm telling you, my mind was telling me you're uncomfortable because you'd rather be you than be a
Mhm.
position, and that's I think important for anybody getting into this profession, or professionally anybody that's developing. Like, man, you're yourself. You just happen to be attached to a company. You could take
Right.
me out of that company and put me somewhere else and give me a different title,
Right.
but I'm still going to be the same dude. I mean, that's I think it's important for you to develop that. And you hit the nail on the head on that. I'm happy to hear that you solved one of my own mysteries.
Also, the last names. Nobody knows anybody's first name. I'm like, why don't we know anybody's first name, guys? I know when they were born, they were given a first and a last name. So, like, I was telling somebody, I was like, all we do is we just call each other by last names. Do you know anybody's first name? Y'all been working together for 5 years. They're like, I think it's Drew, maybe. I was like, yes, that's the person's name. Call him that. So, but yeah, that's kind of I laugh about that too, and that's a bad thing we do in law enforcement, military, anything that's kind of first responders. We sometimes forget our first name, and it's funny. I want you guys to start when law enforcement officers introduce themselves. If they have to use their first name, you're going to hear a little bit of hesitation. It's like because they almost forgot it because they're so used to just saying their last name and their title or their title and their last name. They may even skip their whole first name. They're like, "Oh, I'm Officer Laidler." What happened to Michael? Like, was there anywhere in there? So I just want you guys, and y'all gonna be cracking up and stuff. But hopefully you say Michael Laidler officer. But if you hear people, just realize like we've gotten away from even our first names. That it's been crazy.
So you've been all over the world. You've had a storied career when it came to the public speaking, and I talk a little bit about your travel.
Actually, it was funny because I opened my business in 2017 when I was a lieutenant in the Federal Corrections, the BOP. And first, I came out doing leadership development. And that first 2017, 2018, I did a lot of local engagements just to, get the experience, get the feeling, to get that comfort level. And then I moved out of Louisiana and went to Texas. And then I pretty much shut my business down for nearly 2 or 3 years. Not because I didn't have interest in it. I just got busy doing a lot of stuff for the organization. And then obviously COVID hit and I didn't really have a business plan in place. And it wasn't until like the summer of 21 that it hit me that I was like, why am I not doing more professional speaking? The later part of 21 in about October or so, that's when I found the company called the Speaker Lab. They showed me a marketing method that was very conducive to my work ethic. In 2022, I ended up doing 15 speaking engagements. So the 3 years before that, I did no speaking engagements. 2015, I did 15. I traveled different places like California, Nebraska, Kansas, Oregon, Georgia 2 different times, Ohio, just kind of all over the states. And then this year was pretty cool because I actually got to go speak in Dubai at the World Police Summit. So it actually made me an official international speaker. I didn't just have to say that I was, but I've actually spoken in Dubai. I've also spoken in North Carolina this year. I was in Philadelphia the last 2 weeks, 2 separate weeks. I go to Michigan soon. I go to Minnesota. So going around the country, speaking to different law enforcement groups, whether it's police officers, sheriffs, corrections. I've spoken at warden conferences. It's amazing to see how many different levels of law enforcement we have that are really good people. And when you see that, you're like, this. It's the kind of thing that drives someone like me because I know that there's more out there. I know there's more good people like us that want to see growth and they have the passion for it. They just don't know where to get it from. Me going around the country speaking has been a great journey. I love it. I have other clients in coming up and obviously doing stuff like this and just building up my name has allowed me to do that. But for all of those entrepreneurs or any law enforcement that's thinking about, well, what can I do outside of law enforcement or what can I do in retirement that's law enforcement related? Go become a professional speaker. There's more than enough opportunities. Trust me, I don't want to hog them all. I can't if I wanted to. There's more conferences and opportunities than you could ever fathom. But you have to take that leap and you have to have that work ethic to go get it because it's not easy. And you can even ask Drew. And we've been talking about recording this episode for a couple of months now, and things have happened. But it's different from being a government employee. Government employee, you're going to work every day, 8 to 5. You're going to pay paycheck every 2 weeks. Doing things like a professional speaker on your own, you have to be out there pushing and grinding every day. Having a podcast business, you're out there pushing and grinding every day. So it is a little different from government work, but it's completely fulfilling, especially when you can go around the country speaking on what you believe in.
Is the tone and temperament of most of your public speaking leadership based, like leadership development kind of stuff, like, the stuff that's in your book, or do you vary on the topics that you teach?
It's actually funny you say that, Drew. So when I started my business in 17, it was pretty much solely leadership development. And coming out of the gate, entering 2022, once I learned about more marketing in 21, It was a lot of leadership development. But this year, 2023, I'm starting to focus more on officer wellness. As I've seen, that's become a bigger
Sure.
part of what we do. And that's kind of like in my book, while it has leadership topics, it actually talks a lot about self-awareness. And a lot of that developing who you are starts right here. I'm not showing you how to shoot guns. I'm not showing you how to fight. I'm not showing you how to drive, but I am showing you how to win the battle between your ears. Because I think that is the biggest thing that we have a hard time with in law enforcement. And most of my talks now is more centered around officer wellness. It's about developing who you are, why you do what you do, your path to greatness. And it's also building leaders into supporting the wellness programs that I'm learning that a lot of agencies are pushing for. The state of California, they have pushed millions of dollars into their officers' wellness. But even if Congress approves it, the CEO wants it, you have to have a lot of levels in between that push it. Because if not, you just have a good program that sits in your storage room. More of my talks have been more, I think 2023, I'm starting to see them pivot more the officer wellness, and not saying there's not the leadership development, because whenever I go speak at a chiefs of police or a sheriff association, that's really what they're pushing for. And that's obviously pushing on retention, pushing on engagement, building employee morale, which are all important. I just see there's a better connection for me with the officer wellness, and obviously are developing leaders in that area as well.
Well, I mean, truthfully, they go hand in hand anyway, right? I mean, if you're not developing yourself, you're not developing as a leader. If you're not developing the others around you, then you're going to remain stagnant. For my master's, my capstone project was on mentor programs or mentorship.
Yes.
And people underestimate the retention value a mentor program has, or the transfer of job knowledge. There are so many benefits. So is that a leadership function, or is that actually an officer wellness function? Because now you've got two people that can vent to one another. We don't do that. We're not good at cops aren't good at that. Cops are great dispatchers, especially. That's the because they're underserved and underappreciated, and definitely
100%.
overtasked. So it's all about being able to not have to compartmentalize, because that's what's driving the depression. That's what's driving the obesity. That's what's driving, the sadness, everything. It's not having that outlet. It's not having the ability to. And I think a mentor program can do that. It's just one rung on the whole ladder that you need. But the thing that you're wholly right about is you've got to be able to sell the buy-in from the top to the bottom. Like this part in the middle here, they just use it as a buzzword because they hear the bosses saying it, and they know that the line people are kind of becoming aware of it. So they just throw this mental health buzzword around, and it's not being as effective as it could be.
In the book, there is a chapter on mentorship, because I don't know about you, but I didn't really have a lot of official mentors in my career. And now I've learned how to grow them and grab them and understand how to add value to them, so they're just not adding value to me. But as a law enforcement officer, my first 12 to 13 years, I didn't really have any formal mentors. There was a couple of people that would say, hey, let me show you this. But after one or two, let me show you one of this, it was never anything more formal. So actually, there's a chapter in my book that actually talks about how to acquire a mentor, how to add value to that person, but how to ask the right questions so you can maximize their time. But having a mentor has elevated me in so many ways, just in my professional speaking business alone, not saying anything in my law enforcement, because things that I thought I knew, with a mentor, especially someone that was one step ahead of me, taught me so many things. It literally helped with those SMART goals. So where I would have said, hey, I can learn this in a year, I got with a mentor, I learned it in 3 months. The power of mentorship is amazing on that side. So you had a great project you wrote on.
Like who do you think introduces your ideas, or you yourself as a person, to the senior levels of an organization? It's your mentor. Like whether it's formally done through a program, or just like you say, you naturally select those that you want to follow. Because I'll tell you personally, the people that came to me for advice, and there are plenty of them, and I'm proud of that. I still get phone calls. I am so happy and proud to help in any way that I can, because you know that they're not stagnant. You know that they're doing something with their lives, with their careers, and they want to better themselves. I'll help anybody better themselves. If somebody wants, the promotional path, or somebody wants this, or somebody wants that, and they're working towards it, and they're just, looking for guidance or whatever, I'm all in, because I'm telling you, it's a pay it forward situation where it was given to me. But you're right. It's a matter of seeking out the right. You got to know who to follow and who not to follow, actually.
Yeah, you definitely got to know who not to follow. You are 100% right about that one, because there's been some people I'm like, oh, but follow this person. You start asking them certain questions, you're like, this person has no clue what they're talking about. So yes,
right.
that's very true. I'll give you that.
What did you find bound you from a law enforcement or leadership standpoint on the international stage? I mean, are people across the world seeing the same things we're seeing, or saying the same things we're saying?
As far as, so it's actually pretty cool. When I was doing my pre-event calls and leading up to the conference, this particular conference manager said, hey man, we really like your book, because one of the things that we're pushing for in Dubai is officer wellness. So
Awesome.
when I heard that, and then it's coincidentally coming back to the States over the last 60 days or so, like now it's like really standing out. And I think, and I know back when you started, back even when I started 18 years ago, officer wellness wasn't on the forefront. It wasn't like, hey, let's build these people at Mensa. It's like, well, no, I'm going to get you to this academy. I'm going to show you how to shoot, drive, and fight. And then I need you to do your 25 years, go and drop, and then retire. Now it's like, well, we need to kind of work on this person's mindset, because we're realizing that they leave this organization, they leave this industry, and our rates to live are so much smaller than the rest of the industry, because we didn't manage the mental side of what we do. And we see a lot of bad things. So you and I could probably go back to through all of our stories. The viewers can probably think of all the stories, and we don't have good outlets. So what I learned in Dubai on the international side of things is they actually have a department called the happiness division. Like that's what their folk. Yeah. But mind you, they are a big department, but you're starting to see, like, you start looking at like LA, New York, like I'm starting to see like they're starting to build whole departments. A lot of times we call it peer support. That's kind of what we call it in the States, but it's essentially a happiness department, because you're trying to figure out how to increase employee satisfaction, how to build job morale. But on the international stage, it's even elevated, because I mean, Dubai, they have the money and everything else, the technology, but it's actually pretty cool to see. But yeah, officer wellness is something that it seems like they're addressing as much as anybody else.
I started in a communication center as a dispatcher, and then 25 years later, I was a lieutenant, a shift commander, and I was sent back up to the same communication center to run that organization's 911 center, communication center, basically. And nothing changed in the time that I left. The only thing that really kind of changed was some of the equipment. They definitely dumped a ton more responsibilities, but everybody was still miserable. The paint was kind of the same color, and citizens still yelled at them. But it was a wellness issue. I made it a major point to look into dispatcher trauma, and these are some of the very simple tweaks and fixes that you can be focused on. It only serves to be able to deal with wellness, and then you carry it on the national level to the law enforcement officers, because if everybody is claiming that it's a more violent society, but nobody looks at that part, they think that the police are becoming more violent, which is
it's a response.
It doesn't statistically add up, right? It is a response. And then to be able to see that on the international level, it's the exact same thing. Like, and I'm glad that we're focusing maybe on a root cause where we can maybe bring all of this down a little bit. So good for you, and good for the opportunity for you.
I do want to say, I do appreciate dispatchers, because back in the summer of 2004, my sister was actually a dispatcher for Tallahassee Police. And she's the one that actually brought me the application and said, go ahead and apply. They're hiring, and you meet the qualifications. So I definitely have it's funny, I didn't think about it until now. They're actually more undervalued than law enforcement, because they're definitely not seen, and they don't get the outlet that we get when we show up to the scene and give a solution. They don't get that as consistently. They don't have that appreciation from the public. Like, hey, the dispatcher is the one that gave you all the details. That's how you got to the house. They just think we got there,
and they don't get the closure either. But the sad part is they're not considered first responders in the sense that for retirement purposes, for even for wellness purposes, for some medical benefits, or for PTSD, type workers' comp benefits, they're not considered but the trauma is the exact same. The only thing that's different is
Yes.
the danger, the presence of danger. I mean, that's a little bit different.
But for me, I think just staying in kind of like that wellness, self-awareness side, but in the leadership role side, I think that's what I'm going to push for, because I'm seeing that is where some of the disconnects at. Just based on talking to leaders, you got, once again, you have a chief of police that may spend, let's say, $1 million on this wellness program for his officers or her officers, but that chief isn't the one delivering the program. The
No.
chief isn't the one on a daily basis working at 10 o'clock at night saying, hey, man, you might want to go get with peer support tomorrow. You may want to get in this wellness training we have. You might want to get to the gym. That's not the chief. But if that sergeant, that lieutenant, that corporal, that major aren't on the same page, how do you build the program? Like, you just spent $1 million and it's just sitting there. So that's kind of what I'm leading towards for my next book, just kind of re-emphasizing and giving leaders strategies, how they can actually push programs like that so their employees can actually, grow from it.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. I did it as a lieutenant. Like, to me, there's no more important role in as far as an officer's wellness than the first line supervisor, that first supervisor
Yep.
they had, because they are the best weather detectors. If there's a change in the weather with one of those officers, they know it. They know who's come in pissed off. They know who's come in injured.
Mhm.
They know who's going through the divorce. And then by the time it gets up to it escalates to the lieutenant level, you're just like, what do you mean he's had a drinking problem
Correct.
for 2 years? Like, you've got to instill in them the intervention, like right there. Like, they have to be empowered to intervene, because most of the time when it's the chief's idea or whatever, it's just like, okay, I roll. Yeah. Something about a debrief. And, but there's meaning behind it. There's actually, I think there's plenty of people in law enforcement that complain about what the administration does or doesn't do, but they just either they choose not to listen to what they're doing, or they're already, too far gone, unfortunately. And sometimes you can bring them back, but maybe not.
Yeah. And it's sad because you're right. The Chiefs, and I tell anybody, the CEO's role is to be a visionary. They're in leadership. They're the ones that ideally come up with the biggest ideas. And then it's the responsibility of all the leaders within that rank structure to carry it out. So while people can come up with great ideas, that the CEOs usually, I say, because we can go you and I can become a chief of police in, let's say, Tallahassee Police right now, based on some of our experiences. We may not know all of the rules of the Tallahassee Police Department, but our job is to motivate, inspire, and build the vision of that organization. That doesn't require technical skills of knowing this is zone A, this is zone B. And I think that's what we get away from, because we think that chief of police, his job, her job is to create this vision. They're supposed to create this atmosphere and this idea that's carried out by all the leaders. And that's how I think sometimes we miss out on leadership structure. We think that, well, it's the chief's idea. The chief should be the one doing it. No, the chief has a million things to do. The chief comes up with the idea and the rest of the leaders help carry it out. That's the goal. Yes, the chief walks around and says, how are you doing today to the officers? Yes, the chief goes around and tries to help out. But like you said, they're not the first line supervisor. They're not testing the climate every day of their officers. Or if you're a lieutenant, you don't know, the chief ain't gonna know what's going on with your sergeants. In those other leadership roles, you have to implement these systems that the chief comes up with. But I do believe it is a little bit of hierarchy, and I wish that people do realize that, like, we all have roles, and as leaders, if we're not the CEO, in certain situations, that, hey, it's our role as a leader to implement those strategies, especially wellness programs.
People don't buy what you do, they buy why you're doing it. So it's all in the communication of, you're right, come up with a mission, come up with an effective way to carry out the mission, but you have to communicate it to the people that are going to execute it for you. And you're right. I mean, the chief's job is maybe to walk around and make sure everybody's happy, but the chief also has to make sure the entire community is happy. And it gets back to, conversation one that we had. Sometimes you have to sacrifice morale for the happiness of the community, and vice versa. And that's
Big
what
picture.
being leader's all about. It's all the big picture. You really gotta have thick skin at times. I think something very important that you stressed, it kind of triggered in me. You say that you kind of let your speaker business just kind of simmer for a little bit because of COVID, or just because you were working on other work obligations. I cannot stress enough what an important lesson that is that you've taught right there. That was not your only source of income. That was a secondary source of income. So you have the luxury of just letting it kind of sleep a little bit until you're ready to wake it up again.
For me, I didn't understand. I don't think I understood how important my speaking business was because I didn't really start working on being a professional speaker or even a public speaker until about 2016. And that's because that was my first leadership role. And we all know leaders communicate. And I never wanted to be that person that was in a roll call or a muster delivering information. And you're like, this guy sucks at communicating. I never wanted to be that guy. So I tell people all the time, I was in college. You know how you're supposed to take at least one class on public speaking? I got lucky. I took a class on interviewing. I didn't have to public speak. That's how much I did not want to public speak. And I know they say, well, you're a police officer. You talk to people. It's different. It's different versus being on stage. Like even us doing this podcast, there's a lot of officers that can't do this right now. There's a lot of people in law enforcement roles that can't do it. And that's fine. So for me, back in 2016, when I started working on public speaking, I didn't realize some of the things that I was being set up for in a good way. I didn't realize my skill set. So when I moved and I spent more time in the organization, I kind of put it on the back burner, not realizing the time I was losing. Now, I did have a full-time job. Money was not an issue. Income was not an issue. And I will never tell anybody, I don't care what you see on TV, what you read on Facebook, what you read on, I will never tell you to quit your job. I won't tell you to do that and jump into being an entrepreneur because that's how you become homeless, especially if you have a family. That's how you sleep on couches. And hey, I'm keeping it real. Hey, Drew, if you're going to leave and go full time into any kind of entrepreneur business, whatever that might be, it better at least replace your income plus about 50% more because what you're losing. So let's say, for example, you make 100 grand in your business, you should know you should be able to make at least 150, at least. Because one, you're making 100 grand, but think about the benefits you get as a city employee, as a state employee, as a county employee. You're going to lose that. So all that money that they're putting into your bank account right now, you're going to lose that if you just become an entrepreneur. So you have a sick kid or you're sick, that $35, $40 copay is going to be $150. So keep that in mind. And that's the real side of entrepreneurship. For me, I had a fallback income. I had a full-time job that was paying me great. I had benefits. I mean, just like any other government employee. And it wasn't, like I said, until like 2021 that I realized that I was allowing a skill set that I had built up pretty well. And people told me I was pretty good at speaking, but I was just like, oh, okay, that sounds good. I thought they were just trying to butter me up, but it was one of those situations where I was like, you know what? If I truly have this skill set, let me put it into action and see how well I can do. And it just isn't just about public speaking. For some of us that are watching this, you guys are great at carpentry. You guys have good HVAC skills. You guys know how to shoot well. You guys, you know what I mean? Whatever it might be. But on the entrepreneur side, for me, it was one of those that I realized I had another calling on top of law enforcement, and that was delivering information through my experience and my education that I can help other officers out with. That's what drove me to build my business back up. But I'm not going to lie. 2019, I had one speaking engagement that was paid. It wasn't paid much. 2020 and 2021, zero. My business, I paid for that LLC for 3 years and it did nothing. Right. And it wasn't until 2022 that I'm not going to lie, it skyrocketed from 0 to 15. This year is going to be even better. But it was something that you have to realize that if you don't pursue it, if you don't understand that side of the business, then you're going to suffer. Make sure you have something to do. Make sure you can be productive. Make sure that your projections in whatever business you're going to get into, if you're going to leave your full-time job in law enforcement, that they're projecting that you're going to make at least 50% more of what you make right now because you still got to eat. The electricity ain't going to stay on because you're nice. The grocery store ain't going to give you IOUs. I don't know what they did back in the day, but they don't do that now. Gasoline ain't getting any cheaper. I mean, so for the business side, I definitely say, while it may seem good for some of us, remember, it's a lot of work. Us putting things together, this is the on stage things you guys see, but there's a lot of behind the scene things that we've had to do to even get this podcast to run properly. And sometimes we just see the final product and say, man, now I want to do that. And you can, but just know there's more to the story. And
Right.
don't just quit your job. No, I don't care. Even if you read Greatness Beyond the Badge, you're like, hey, man, I'm the superstar. I can make sure you can make money in whatever you're trying to do. And that's why I tell people, do not quit, do not leave. Make sure you have something consistent that you can build.
I think it's a testament to Gary Vaynerchuk said every overnight success takes about 10 years. And you're kind of testament to that. It's completely a grind. You can grow and expand while you're in a very stable income environment, and that's the time to do it. That's the time to hammer away. Like your growth and development is going to contribute to the main job that you have anyway.
Yes.
And then now you're making connections on the outside, and then next thing you know, if that rug somehow gets pulled from underneath you for whatever reason, whether it's injury, illness, fired, whatever, you got something to fall back on. I can't stress enough what great advice this is that Michael's given out to you, dispensing.
Be consistent on your personal growth and your development. Every day you skip on growing, on developing yourself, is going to be a day you lost. Only you control that. Only you can be that deciding factor. And the better you are at yourself, the better you can be at everything else.
Perfect. The book is Greatness Beyond the Badge. He's Michael Laidler. You can get the book on Amazon. Michael, thank you very much for joining us. We hope to do more stuff with you in the future. Thanks for everybody for tuning in. Drew Breezy for Failure to Stop. Guns up, giddy up.